and Professor Lilikutti, and Rishika from 3rd CPE. The reason why we are holding this series of discussions is to help generate awareness of languages that should be more well known. We will leave the Q&A to the end after the last presenter has finished speaking. The instructions to put up the questions will be given then itself. Now, to start this off, I would like to call Aditi from 3rd year EJP with her presentation on the language Sindhi. Uh, Give us a second, please. Aditi is working with her mic. Do stay with us. We're having a technical error.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Please continue.
Okay. So hi everyone. I'm Aditi. Like he said, but okay. So the I'm here to talk about the language Sindhi. So Sindhi is a language that originated in Pakistan, and it is the name of a place in Pakistan, and um, it is an Indo-Aryanic language. And so I'm going to divide this sort of session into two parts. I'm going to talk about the language and its origins, and then I'm going to talk about my family and I'm going to talk about my family and my granny mostly. So I'm going to tell stories about my granny, which is one of my favorite things to do. Okay, so yeah, so a lot of Sindhis came to India during the partition or slightly before the partition. Some people came to sort of avoid religious persecution, or they were scared that they would be asked to convert their religion, and other people came because they just wanted to live in India and they prefer that over Pakistan. So that's how the language made its way to India. And a lot of Hindu and Sikh Sindhis moved to India after the partition. And it, however, like very uncannily, it is also kind of similar to some dialects of Gujarati, which I found interesting. Um, yeah, so a lot of the people who moved from Pakistan moved to smaller towns and cities because they were allotted land in if they moved to a smaller town instead of a city. So, for example, my family moved to very small cities in Tamil Nadu because they were given a little bit of land to set up because they were essentially refugees, so they were given refugee status. So as they moved, their language moved with them. And Hyderabad was a place where a huge colony of Sindhis moved, and till today, Hyderabadi Sindhi is one of the dialects that's spoken. Um, so the other dialects, some of them are, I'm sorry, one second. Okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, so yeah, some of the other dialects are Shikarpuri and Peshawari Sindhi. So I speak Shikarpuri Sindhi. My family speaks that because we're from a place called Shikarpur. So okay, so I'll move on to talking about my family a little bit because I think that's more entertaining. So my granny actually taught me how to speak Sindhi, and she's the reason I know it. And a lot of people my age never learned it because it's a language that's slowly dying out as people move to India and they're away from the community. So yeah, so I'm actually happy to learn it. I'm happy my granny taught me it. When I say it's an old language, let me give you a few examples. One of them is so the colors that we have in the language. We have only a couple of colors, and the rest of the colors are referred to by their Hindi names because it's such an old language. And then there's other examples of it being very old because there's no word for woman in Sindhi at all, which I was very shocked to learn. And the two words that are there, one is jala, which means wife, and the other one is mai, which it technically translates to maid. So there's no word for woman. Um, which again surprising. So my granny, let me tell you a little bit about her. She studied Tamil. She did her education in Tamil till the seventh grade. She knows a little bit of English because we speak it at home. Her favorite words to say are "Oh my God," and other than that, she says she knows Hindi, but I kind of doubt it. And because we're in Bangalore, she's picked up a few Kannada words. So the reason I'm telling you all this is because I want to talk about managing different languages because that becomes a very important part of knowing a minority language. So when I say managing languages, I'll talk about a few stories and you'll sort of understand what I mean. So, one of my favorite stories that I've heard time and time again through my childhood is a story of how me and my granny, when I was very small, we went shopping and she was trying to buy a kurti or something, and it was white in color and it was a little bit dirty. So, like, not dirty, but like kind of like a kind of dirty. So, we went shopping and so the word for dirty or like little bit untidy is mero in Sindhi. So she's telling the shopkeeper, "Ye mera hai," which in Hindi means this is mine. So he was like, no, 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 it's ours. Don't take it, blah, blah. And so it went on over and over again, where she was saying, this is mine. And he was like, no, no, it's ours, to the point where he thought that she's taking away his items without paying for them. And she finally had to sort of explain in broken Hindi that no, no, she means it's dirty. And that's why she wanted another piece. So things like little stories like that, it seems funny to me, but when you think about it, it comes from not knowing the language of the country you're in, which I think is an important thing to talk about. The other thing with minority languages is because they also become a sort of code. So every time we're in a public place, like we're traveling somewhere in a train or something, it you can talk about anything and no one around you will know the language. It's very useful to gossip about people, to sort of talk about why. I mean, just to talk about other people without them knowing. Because if you speak a language like Hindi, chances are someone in your birth or like around your birth will know what you're saying. But if you speak Sindhi, very low chances. Um, so there is also I grew up and I went to school in a place with my cousins and my friends, all of whom were Sindhis. We talked about, I mean, we had like prayer groups. We lived in a building where almost everyone was a Sindhi. And so I sort of grew up in this bubble where I thought Sindhi was a very common, normal thing. But after moving away, after slowly sort of leaving the building, leaving school, I understood how few people know Sindhi. And even people who belong to a Sindhi family, they barely know Sindhi. So, yeah, so I feel like it's a language that on one hand you want to hold on to, and on the other hand no one else knows it, so there's very few ways to hold on to it. So an idea that I would like to talk about is finding homes in different languages. So my granny moved to Tamil Nadu. She learned Tamil, she studied in Tamil. So you know it's yes, you're getting out of this bubble, you're getting out of your culture, but you're finding a home in a different language. She now has a lot of Tamil friends. She uses that language as one of her main modes of communication. And so I think that this is you can find new cultures, find new communities just by finding your home in a new language, even if it's not the language of your culture. There's also a sort of duality of knowing a language that nobody else knows. On one hand, you feel shame to a certain extent, because growing up I was always told, don't tell anyone that you speak Sindhi because it's a language that comes from Pakistan. And for a long time I didn't. To anyone who was not Sindhi, I wouldn't tell them that I know Sindhi because they know that Sindh is in Pakistan. And it's sort of shameful. I don't know why, but my family felt a lot of shame um, of saying that we're part of the Sindhi community. There was a certain sense of shame. And but today I sort of use that to humor myself. If anyone asks me where I'm from, and if I feel like they'll be able to take a joke, I will say that I'm from Pakistan, and sort of watch the color drain from their face as they realize they don't know how to react a lot of the times. And then I sort of explain. And it also shows you how people's attitudes are towards different languages and different countries. And the other thing that I've always been told is to have pride in my language, which is again confusing to a child because you're telling them not to tell anyone that they speak this language. On the other hand, you're telling them, teach your children this language, make sure you continue to speak this language. So there's a sort of duality of pride and shame. So yeah, so this is my talk. This is the end of what I have to say. Does anyone have anything else to say? Okay, I think we can move on to the next person.
Thank you, Aditi, for your presentation. I would now like to call upon Amirta Rao from second year MA English. She is going to give her presentation on Thanjavur Marathi, her experiences with the language growing up in Tamil Nadu, being a Marathi, and the differences in Marathi and Tamil.
Good evening, everyone. Am I audible? I hope I'm audible.
Yes,
So,
you are. Please continue.
also, my topic is about Tanjore Marathi. To understand this, we have to go through a little history, which is Maharashtrians from 16th century. Shivaji Rao's brother Venkoji Rao actually migrated from Maharashtra to the southern part of Tamil Nadu, which is Tanjore. They established their Maratha kingdom there, and their rule was somewhere from 16th century to mid 17th century. So in this period, they had to learn Tamil. So Maharashtrians who had to learn Tamil, they like mixed up together and came up with a dialect called Tanjore Marathi. So other people from Maharashtra also had to come to Tanjavur because of taking care of administration, soldiers, noblemen, etc., etc. So every family has their roots connected to somewhere. Like my family used to say, our grandfather was doing this; he was a very big man. Our grandfather was doing that, etc., etc. So basically, these are Maharashtrians who moved to Tamil Nadu. Also, this language has no script. Like, or if you want to learn Kannada or Marathi, then you have to go to someone who actually knows the language. This is translated orally, and also this is the only language that sustains the passage of time without losing its much pronunciation style or expression or characteristics, whatever you want to call. So, this dialect is totally similar to the standard Marathi, but only some words, their pronunciation is different from standard. So mainly the verb positioning is what actually differs from standard Marathi and Tanjore Marathi. Like for example, in standard Marathi, we ask "Tu kasa eyes," which means "How are you?" But in Tanjore Marathi, we ask "Tu kasa eyes, sir." The sound of "a" sound at the end is what different from each other. Also, Z sound is not there in Tanjore Marathi. Like, if you wanna ask what is your name in standard Marathi, you ask Tuja Nam Kai. But if it comes to Tanjore Marathi, then you might ask Tuja Nam Kai. It actually Tuja turns to Tuja. The Z is actually not there in any part of the Tanjore dialect. Also, because of these sounds, often people confuse Tanjore Marathi with Urdu and Saurashtra. They might ask, "Oh, is it a dialect or is there any language like this? I thought Marathi is so different. So people are actually familiar with only the standard Marathi and not really with the Tanjore dialects. If we even say, they will be like, no, is it Tamil or you are just making it up, something like that. Also, this language which has no script but also has many stories, like our grandmother used to say many stories like Gori Mata, Rich Kahani, etc. etc. All these are transmitted only through orally, and we don't have a single script about it. Though these differences are small, it is very difficult for the speakers to understand. Like, a standard Marathi speaker cannot understand Tanjore dialect, and it was vice versa. There are a few fun facts about Tanjore Marathi. Is that Tanjore Maharashtrians was the first one to make sambar. Like, it has become Tamil cuisine now, but it was first cooked by Tanjore Maharashtrians. I don't know if this is true, but every family member, everybody in my family used to tell me this. Also, now Tanjore Maharashtrians are actually migrated to many parts of this world. Like they are in America or even northern parts of Tamil Nadu and northern parts of India, etc. etc. So, what keeps their roots closer is for every year we celebrate. Gudi Padwa, which is our New Year. So we come to our home, like wherever we are, we will travel south and we will come to our homes and we will celebrate it together, etc. etc. So we also got our own association, like South Indian Maharashtrian Association, which is especially for Tanjore Marathi people. This is also called as Dakshini Marathi. This is Southern Marathi. And their objective is to keep this culture and tradition alive and people to understand their roots and the necessity to feel proud. This necessity of feeling proud about it is because being a person who's having their mother tongue, the mother tongue belongs to north part of India, but you live in southern part of India, people literally will see you differently. Like if you speak Marathi in front of other Tamil people, they'll be like, "Oh, she's from North India." Like you know how southern part of India treats North Indian. So these differences and your friends especially, they'll be like, "Oh, you're flexing that you have this language and you don't want us to know what you're talking about." It's like so the food actually unites us. Like they try our food and obviously they might have some remarks about it like this dish tastes like that, etc, etc. But still for the fight of sambar it never ends. Like nobody will accept it that it was first time the Maharashtrians to cook sambar and all, but still even there are like so many differences. And also you can see the Tamil influence in our dialect. Like example, if you wanna ask, did you eat? In Tanjore Marathi, it is Khana Kalista. But the verb position actually transfers. The verb position in Tamil and Tanjore Marathi is the same. The verb comes first and the object comes at the last. So this is how the structure of Tanjore Marathi is influenced by Tamil. Also, there are like people who mixes up Tamil words totally. Like in a sentence, you might actually find one or two Tamil words and less Marathi words. So this is how Tamil influences Marathi, and the standard Marathi is also influencing Tanjore Marathi. It's like a mixture of all three languages. And also, being a Marathi girl in Tamil Nadu is like a little bit difficult because people might actually find it very hard to pronounce your name actually. So, me having a surname Rao, nobody spells it Rao. It becomes Rao, Rayo, Ra, Rai. So, it's very hard for them to understand the surname, which is actually of three letters. I don't know why. So, identity crisis is also there. Like when somebody asks, "What is your native place and what is your mother tongue?" Me being able to speak Tamil fluently, if they find me speaking Tamil fluently, and if I say Marathi, they'll be like, "Oh, tell one language." Also, if I say Tanju or Trichy, anything other than that, they'll be like, you speak Marathi, but you are telling that your native place is in Tamil Nadu. So how does it work? So I have to like tell the whole history for them, and it is really frustrating because people actually should know about this, and only if they know, I will be spared, or else I should go and say everybody about the history and this is how this works. So that irritates a bit. Also, uh, everybody thinks that it is really hard for someone to live in another place and having other language, but I always find it interesting because I get to celebrate both South Indian and North Indian festivals. Like we celebrate Gudi Padwa, Holi, etc. So also we celebrate Pongal, Diwali. So every month we have one celebration, and that is what makes it interesting. And with this, I want to end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amrita, for your presentation. It was very informative. Thank you. I will now call upon Rishika from third year CPE. She will give her presentation on the language Mathili.
Am I audible?
Yes, please go on.
Okay, I'll share my screen. Yes, can you see the screen?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay. Okay, so I'm talking on the language of Maithili, which is from Bihar. So, to give you like a context of how languages are distributed in Bihar, I'll so like Maithili is the old language of the region of Tirhut, which is still dominated by Orthodoxy and Maithil Brahmins and castes. So Maithili is the only Bihari language which has a script of its own. I'll show you the script. The script is called Tirhuta and it has a very strong literary history. So the one on the left is the Maithili Tirhuta script and the one on the right is Hindi for comparison. So um, so Bhojpuri is the language that is spoken in the eastern and western Champaran and the Sharan and the Bhojpur district, which you'll see is on the top west and east Champaran and the Saran and the Muzaffarpur area. Maithili is spoken in the center region of Bihar. You see Samastipur, Darbhanga, Saharsa. These regions are mostly dominated by Maithili speaking people. And the lower region, the Patna, Aurangabad, the Rohtas, it's Maghi is spoken there. And also the Dravidian language spoken by the scheduled tribe called the Oraon, which is still very prevalent. Just a second. Yes. Okay, so when we talk about dialects and Maithili, a lot of languages had been clubbed as dialects of Hindi back when the British was ruling us. So, in an attempt to like easily classify languages in the early days of the British rule, they noted that the regional languages of the Hindi belt to be like the dialects of Hindi. But when you see like Braj Bhasha was like the most common literary medium from the 15th to the 19th century, but it is often treated as like a dialect of Hindi. So is like Maghi and Chhattisgarhi and Bhojpuri and Haryanvi. But then if you consider these languages, it's more like they fall under the Hindi zone or like the Hindi belt in the northern part of India. So, like, if you consider Maithili, it's like the easternmost regional languages of the Hindi belt in northern India. But, like, it has more resemblance to Bengali and Gujarati than it has to Hindi. Similarly, like Rajasthani, which is on the westernmost, like, language belt of the northern part of India, it has more resemblance to Gujarati than it has to, like, standard Hindi. So, I think like this is one of the reasons why so many languages like Maghi and even Kanauji and Haryanvi, all of them are like fall under the category of being dialects of Hindi. So okay, I'll show you. So like this Maharaja Rameshwar Singh of Darbhanga, he started he was one of the main pioneers of raising the demand for a separate state for Maithili speaking people, but unfortunately he lost. He is Maharaja Rameshwar Singh of Darbhanga, whose fort, like the Darbhanga Palace, still, I mean, it somewhat stands. It is ruined, but like, yeah, people farm there. Okay, so these are some of the dishes of Bihar, mostly eaten by Maithili speaking regions, which is in the northern eastern part of Bihar. This is like Malpua, and you call this Gujia in Hindi, but you call this Purukia in Maithili. You'll see there's Malpua and mutton. There's Thekwas, which is very common when people perform Chhat Puja. Here you have Modi and Amir Khan enjoying some litti chokha. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rishika, for that wonderful presentation. We'll move on to the next presenter now. I would like to call upon Dupi from third year CPE. She will present on the language Galo.
Hi guys. Am I audible? Hello.
Hi, Dupi, you're audible.
Thank you, ma'am. So I belong to the Galo tribe of Arunachal Pradesh, and I'll be doing my talk on the same. So in Arunachal, it is like in the official documents, it say that there are 26 major tribes and 110 sub-tribes. While this is written in most of the documents and books of government of Arunachal Pradesh, and like it is said so in the speeches, I've read in one article that it's there's really that many tribes, or even if there are, it's not specified. Even in the part 13th of the Constitution order, there are only like 22 tribes mentioned with the latest amendments. So there's a lot of discrepancies behind how many tribes are actually there in Arunachal and how many sub tribes are there, and they're not indicated in any of the official documents. And we shall not further dive into it. I just thought I should let you guys know about it, so that I don't misinform you guys. Yeah. And if we go more further into it, it will just open up a space for like a whole new conversation. So now coming to my tribe, so we are the Galo tribe and we speak the Galo language. um, we are known to be one of the major tribes in Arunachal Pradesh, and Galo language is the language of the Tani branch of the Tibeto-Burman language family. It is mainly spoken in the West Siang, Leparada, and Lower Siang districts of Arunachal Pradesh, and to some extent in East Siang and Upper Subansuri district of Arunachal Pradesh. And we share close cultural not cultural we share close linguistic ties with the major tribes like Nishi and Tagin and some other related tribes. And also our language, so our tribe was earlier, like long back, it was known as like the Adi Galo tribe, and Adi is also one of the major tribes. So uh, so like so Adi and Galo, like both the tribes share a lot of close cultural connections, and we are exposed to each other's, like we are very much exposed to each other's culture, and we try to learn each other's language and all that. And because of that, like a lot of times people assume or believe that our language, that is the Galo language, is a dialect or an idiolect of the Adi language, which is not true, because our language, we have like in the purest forms of both the languages, we have like very distinct words, and uh, even culture, and the traditions that we follow, they're all distinct. So uh, yeah. And uh, so in 2008, the State Assembly of Arunachal Pradesh, they deemed the Galo language as an independent language, which had its own its own grammar and script. And us, we don't really have our own indigenous script. We follow the modified Roman script, and which is not really uncommon, because a lot of the other languages, like the Turkish language, Vietnamese, and even Khasi, and like other languages, also use the same script. And I'm not really familiar with the script because we were never taught in schools, and yeah. So uh, and moving on, I'm gonna talk about some unique sounds that are like, I believe is peculiar to our language. I'm not sure if it's there in other languages, but if just correct me if I'm wrong. So we have words like, so luktir is like is the Galo word for chili powder. Yeah, so it's written as in English. It's written as Luktir, and normally anyone would pronounce it like luktir, or something like that, something along those lines. But how we pronounce like the tir is different. So we call it like luktir, and the same. So if there's a surname called Riba, it's spelled Riba, and it would usually be said Riba. And a lot of people, not just like people from outside our state, but also from within our state, like people from other tribes, they call it like Riba, but like we call it Riba. So I think that's kind of unique. And also there's one more unique thing in our tribe, and that is like how we name ourselves. And that's by, we take uh, the the last syllable of our father's name, and then like we use it as a prefix for our first prefix for our names. So my father's name is Kardu, and I have like, my name is Dupi, and then my younger brother's name is Dukar, and it goes like that. So when my brother has his kids, hopefully he does, yeah, when he does, his the car from the Dukar will be taken, and then it will be used to make other names for his kids. So it's like that. And because of this naming system, it is said that a lot of the people in Arunachal, I mean, a lot of the Galo people in Arunachal can recall the names of our ancestors up to like 20 names. And I only know up until like my great grandfather, I guess. Like, I'm really bad at these. But then a lot of the people in, especially in rural areas, they can like name up to like our ancestor, like the first person that was born, and he's known as Abotani. He's believed to be our progenitor. So yeah. And also this naming system also shows that our tribe, like our society is primitively patriarchal. Uh, Again, this can open up a space for a lot of debate, but let's not go there. And like with the recent times, as times are changing, like I have heard of purported sorry, instances where people have totally, disregarded this kind of naming system, and also, or they sometimes take up their mother's last syllable and stuff. So times are changing now. Yeah, and also for our language, we don't really have like particular names for days, like weekdays and months, and yeah, the year and everything. uh, uh, we usually, like, we don't have, so we just call it like tomorrow or day after tomorrow, and there are like certain words for uh, every month. Like we go by how, the, like, the harvesting time of the month and everything. There's like particular names to it, of the names that, of which, like, I'm not really aware of. I don't really remember. Yeah, so it's like that. uh and again, about this, like, in one of the articles by Arunachal Times. So I've always had this, a question in my mind about how we never had like days for weekdays, sorry, names for weekdays and everything. I mean, I thought it was nice if we could have, but then I read in one of the articles, and then it said how, maybe we could, like, uh, adjust to the changing times, and then, how now the 7 day system is, you know it's like almost, it's accepted by most countries and languages. And how countries, like the languages that didn't have names for the same, have started coming up with names. Now we could do the same thing. Or there's another view to it, saying how, uh, if we try to adjust those things, we could also, you know lose touch of our roots. So I believe, like, we could, come up to a point where maybe we adjust, but at the same time we also don't forget the roots. We use the traditional words that are there for the traditional things, and then the and then maybe come up new words for, I guess, the new things that come up. So, like, a lot of the people in Arunachal, we just call like Tuesday, Monday, and then even for words like mobile, like, we don't have anything like that. Like, for even for table and chair, we kind of borrow words from like languages like Hindi, English, or even Assamese. Yeah, and now it's, there's a very disconcerting uh, uh, issue going on in our national, where, like, we, like us, the generations, our generations, and the generations that are following us and that will follow us, are kind of losing our touch with our language, our culture, and everything. More on the language part, because a lot of the Arunatalis, we, not a lot, I guess, like, especially people who've stayed in the, uh, who have been brought up in the capital state of Arunachal, and who come outside to study, we don't know our own language. Thankfully for me, my parents forced me to speak my own language since like since we were born. So I mean, I couldn't speak that time, but I'm just saying. So yeah, thankfully my mom did that. So I kind of know my language. I know how to, use words and stuff. But still, it's a very wish-washed version of the actual language. And as generations follow this, the language is kind of dying out. And I believe that is also a problem with a lot of like minor languages, where languages just die out because of, like, we amalgate with other cultures and other languages, and then learn those, and then we eventually kind of forget ours. And then, I think that is a pressing matter. Yeah, that's all for my talk. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dupi, for your presentation. We will move to the next presenter now. I will now call upon Professor Chinnappa BG He's a researcher working on politics of identity and history within the Kodwa ethno-linguistic minority context. He was born in Coorg. His presentation is about his mother tongue, Kodwa. Along with that, he will share his concerns about the marginalization of less popular languages. His presentation is titled "Linguistic Landscape of Kodagu: Performative Traditions and the Informal Digital Archives".
Sorry, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
All right, I'm having a bit. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
All right, just a second. I'm trying to. I'm finding it difficult to share both the script and the screen. If you could give me 2 minutes.
Yes, sir, please take your time.
All right. Thank you so much for waiting. Uh, so today's presentation is titled "Linguistic Landscape of Kodagu: Performative Traditions and the Informal Digital Archive". This is an attempt at trying to capture the complexity of identity formation in the Kodwa context, linguistic context, and how there are different modes through which the community as such is reflecting on its linguistic identity and cultural identity. Um, Kodagu, anglicized Coorg, is a district in the South Indian state of Karnataka, tucked in the hills of the Western Ghats. It borders the northern district of Kerala to the south and the west, the districts of Hassan to the north, and Mysore to the east. Historically, the province was independently administered under various regional powers. It was a princely state under the Haleri kings between the 1600s to 1834, a chief commissioner administered province under the British East India Company, 1834 to 1957. Later, the British India government, 1857 to 1947, and a Part C state from 1947 to 1956. It was later merged as a district into the newly created linguistic state of Karnataka in 1956. These changes are instrumental in understanding the various patterns of socio-cultural development among the communities in the region. The presentation today will explore the critical role of contemporary informal digital archives present on various social media platforms by locating them as important inflections in understanding the nuances of the Kodwa ethno-linguistic minority. The Kodwa is spoken by 11 of the 18 indigenous communities in Kodagu, of which the Kodwa community forms the dominant speaking group. The Kodwa is part of the Proto-South Dravidian family of languages composed of Irula, Tamil, Malayalam, Kota, Toda, Badaga, Kannada, and Tulu. Most of them are unscripted and have a rich oral tradition. Often, these languages are treated as primitive remnants as against a rich literary tradition of languages with scripts. The politics of literacy, as marked by a modern language producing literature, meaning that which is written, marginalizes orality and its linguistic spheres. How can one enable an understanding of orality beyond the confines of writing? What are the alternative locations to understand the language practices of a community? How can instances of language practices and the informal documentation on social media be treated as archival sites? The presentation seeks to explore the critical salience of these questions and its relevance to the Kodwa ethno-linguistic landscape. The earliest attempt at documenting Kodwa language is attributed to Captain R.A. Cole, who served as a superintendent of Coorg. His work, Elementary Grammar of Coorg Language, 1867, is the first substantial linguistic work undertaken by a European towards making the language accessible to the colonial public. Cole notes in the preface that the famed German linguist Reverend H. Mogling, a representative of the Basel Mission, known for his translations of Kannada literature and playing a critical role in the publication of the first Kannada dictionary, had given up studying Kodava owing to difficulty in conveying the exact pronunciation of words. The misplaced assertion in his work that Kodavatakku is a dialect of Kannada can be attributed to influence of linguistic works previously undertaken by notable provincial officials such as Mogling, who served as the director of public instruction in Kodagu. Later works pertaining to language include translations of Kodava folk songs, among other ethnographic details of Kodava customary practices in the Gazetteer of Coorg 1817 by Reverend G. Richter, and glossary of important vernacular terms occurring in Coorg official correspondence 1891, which is published as a handbook for the British officials administering Coorg. These attempts were mostly driven by ethnographic and Orientalist interests, and also representing modes of colonial knowledge production useful for administration. Breaking away from this pattern, Pattole Palame, published in 1924 by Nadikkerenda Chinnappa, documented folk songs, proverbs in Kodavatakku, life cycle rituals of the Kodava community. This becomes one of the first attempts by a native official to document the oral traditions in Kodagu. It was in this book that Kodavatakku was published for the first time using the Kannada script. A recording of Nadikkerenda Chinnappa narrating the parable of the prodigal son and a rendition of a self-composed Swadesha Priya Kirtana, or the Coorg national anthem, can be found in the archives of the Linguistic Survey of India at University of Chicago. Interestingly, Pattole Palame was published as a bilingual text, both in Kodava and Kannada. Sʌmæntɪks argues, as a language without script, Pattole Palame employed Kannada translations of Kodava songs to access modernity through a dominant language with substantial literary past. As seen in the above instances, the documentation of Kodava language is enmeshed with recording folk songs and customary practices, etc. It can be attributed to attempts at capturing the orality of a language rooted in performative traditions such as songs sung during village festivals, life cycle rituals, as against literary historiography most often undertaken to trace the development of dominant languages. However, time and again, the salience of Kodava and other languages rooted in orality is questioned for its lack of script and literary production. Towards this, various attempts at developing a Kodava script have passed under the bridge, such as the script developed by Kiran Subbaiah in 1980 and the Coorgi Cox script developed by the German linguist Greg M. Cox in 2005. The most recent of these attempts being the discussion held in the month of February 2022 under the aegis of Karnataka Kodava Sahitya Academy towards the development of a new Kodava script. The low traction of these attempts among the Kodava language speakers is linked to the lack of instructional materials, institutionalization of language and the script in the three language system, and funding. In a historic move towards institutionalizing Kodava language, the Karnataka Kodava Sahitya Academy introduced a postgraduate course in Kodava offered by Mangalore University at Field Marshal K.M. Karyappa College, its constituent college in Madikeri, Kodagu, in the year 2022. On the other end of the spectrum are modern inflections of language practices. In this regard, the critical frame of performative traditions as language sites is instrumental towards understanding various such transactions. Traditionally, ethnographic and anthropological methods have foregrounded the important position occupied by the field in enabling an understanding of the chosen site. Special attention is paid to the way in which the research negotiates with the field. Research negotiates with what the field has to offer and how the individual observer should enable information through various research tools in the form of interviews, observations, documentations, and even employing special methods of writing such as thick description. Most often, the proclaimed attempt is to capture the lived realities of the research site such that the role of the objective observer is minimized and even made irrelevant. This can be treated as a remnant of the universalist claim of such knowledge-making enterprise, which can be traced back to the colonial period. Language within these methods of study poses an interesting set of challenges. As a living social entity, the study of linguistic forms renders the language beyond the confines of its everyday transaction. The The cultural, affective, and sensorial attributes of the language is undermined in this respect, while making it schematic in the universal disciplinary vocabulary of linguistics. This corresponds to the capabilities of writing form to capture the ephemeral sound through arbitrary symbols drawn for the purpose. In the absence of written documentation form, folk performative sites offers rich materials to understand the language and its multifaceted practices, and even resisting entrenched documentary methods that limit the possibilities of engagement. The Kodwa ethno-linguistic minority context is inherently linked to the customary and folk practices of the mountainous agrarian cultures of Kodagu. The patrilineal Kodwa lived in large clans, groupings of agnatic descendants in an Ainmana, an ancestral homestead, until the latter part of the 19th century. These dwellings were dispersed across the Ur village, forming a social unit tied by customary links to the forest, fields, and other clans, headed by the Ur Taka, the village headman, from a said clan. Groupings of Ur formed a Nad, a region headed by a Nad Taka, or a provincial headman, who was headed by the Desha Taka, above the other two governing entities. The social function of the clan was linked to various customary rituals and performative practices spanning across the 3 degrees of governance. Immediate to the clan was the worshipping of the ancestral spirit called the Karana, around whom the annual propitiation and harvest festivals surrounded. During the harvest festival, the village bardic groups visited various ancestral homesteads to sing the Manepattu, a song tracing the lineage of the family from the founding ancestor, in case of the male, a Karana; in case of a female, a Karanachi. The worship also included the annual offerings made to ancestors called Karana Koduppa. At the level of the village, various ritual observations are held across the year, such as the propitiation of the spirits of the forest, soil, field, wild animals such as tigers, and the village deity. The harvest festival is celebrated with the entire Ur and the Nadu gathering to perform the harvest dance in the Ur Mandir, an open space that is part of the village commons, accompanied by folk songs. The festivals of the village gods, usually usually a vengeful unmarried deity such as Chaundi, Bhadrakali, Bhagavati, is accompanied by ritual dances offered to these goddesses as part of the observation. These village gatherings become performative sites of rich cultural observations with songs, dance, and customary observations. Rooted in orality, these performative practices can come to represent the lived sphere of the language and its associated significance. In recent times, language and cultural activism among Kodavas have taken various forms. Of them, digital platforms have come to host various community-specific debates. The informality of this cultural expression should be seen in connection with the degrees of its personal usage of the digital platform. In turn, these become a reflection of communitarian identity and negotiation patterns with socioeconomic and cultural questions. In this regard, these digital inflections of cultural practices should be located as critical points in understanding the ethno-linguistic minority politics in Kodagu. For the purpose of the presentation, I'd like to draw your attention to 3 engagements on digital platforms that should be seen from the point of view of the above discussed linguistic performative contexts. Talk Pariyana is a YouTube Instagram channel that engages with Kodwa community by producing short videos that narrate stories from various folk contexts of Kodagu. They introduced their Facebook page as a platform for us to do exactly what the name suggests: talk in the language that binds us all together, Kodwa Takku. The narrations on the YouTube are conducted both in English and Kodwa Takku, with a targeted aim to cater to young Kodwa speaking adolescents. The stories range from origin stories of gods and goddesses of Kodagu found in the folk songs to explaining customary practices and even histories of Kodagu. The animated narration, often rendered by women from different walks of life, tries to bring alive the stories with bodily gestures and also encourages children to contribute on similar lines. The second instance is of a conversation or presentation chain dubbed Kodava Paja Sahitya Changola, translating as a chain of Kodava literature. The conversation series was introduced by a person called Surat Somaya, president of the Bangalore Kodava Samaj's youth wing, during the early COVID-19 lockdown of 2021. 2020. The idea was to nominate a Kodwa speaker after every presentation, which would be continued like a chain by the person nominated next. These posts range from narrating stories, songs, proverbs, and elocutions in Kodavatakka. In the midst of the pandemic lockdown, various Kodavas from all across the world participated in this chain of nominations, producing a wide array of materials in Kodavatakka. The third instance I'd like to mention are the numerous videos that are uploaded on YouTube and other social media platforms pertaining to customary practices from different parts of Kodagu. These videos are captured on mobile phones by attendees of various festivals or rituals. Once uploaded on social media platforms, they are widely circulated among the Kodava speaking population. The recordings in question are pertaining to ritual observations in different temples from around Kodagu, folk songs sung and dance performed to them. The video uploaded on sites like YouTube produce an alternative documentation of customary practices and an archival site. Rather than treating them as mere instances of people putting up videos, it must be treated as dispersed sourcing of documentary materials from remote corners of Kodagu. Most often, the customary practices, rituals, and performances vary from village to village and between regions. The knowledge that a respondent might have would be limited to the cultural and kinship ties that provides access to a particular village. In this regard, the dispersed documentation of videos present on digital platforms such as YouTube, Instagram, etc., through organized efforts or personal posts should be looked at as serious materials for research. All the above instances become an extension of the linguistic landscape of the Kodavatakka, bearing a close association with performative practices rooted in the landscape of Kodagu. The employment of orality in all these contexts renders it lucidly into the transactions of non-literary languages. This contributes to what I would term as informal digital archive, capturing the multiplicity of language instances from various parts of Kodagu. In a sense, these digital recordings resist anthropological ethnographic modes of documentation through the performative aspects, especially through the diversity of content made available in the process, averting singular monolithic constructions of standardized Kodava practices. The informality of these practices emerge from modes of documentation forming part of a personal experience of an ordinary person, recording instances from their village life. In this regard, these informal digital archives are a critical site to negotiate with various modes of research in ethno-linguistic contexts like Kodagu. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for that very detailed presentation. Now, last but not the least, I will call upon Professor Lilikutti. Her presentation is on the language of the Maveland tribe, how the language in its isolated form is not spoken today because of its mixing with other languages like Malayalam, and about the musical instrument Tudi, the sounds of which are themselves a part of the language.
Sorry, am I audible now? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay, fine, thank you. Yeah, I am the only one in this panel presenting another community. I'm not from the Maveland tribe. I'm representing the tribe. And I would like to carry on where Chinnappa sir stopped. I'm crossing the border of Karnataka, moving to Kerala to represent this Maveland tribe, about whom I have, or my research is based on this tribe and their oral songs mainly. Maveland tribe is settled in Kannur and Kasaragod districts of Kerala. These are my friends from the tribe. Their population is around 30,000. They are a minority group. Their language is basically, they had a language called Markili language, which is a mixture of, we can say, Tulu, Malayalam, Kannada, Tamil, etc. For example, in Markili Bhasha, Amma is father, Appa is mother, brother is Anna, sister is Akka, and Ura, okay, for village, which Chinnappa just now said, Ura. Karanavar, they have Karanavar Teyam, okay, Karanavar, Karanavati, those words are there. Yeah. My association with this tribe starts right from my childhood. I have studied with them in the school days. So my memory of their language particularly is, it's a little rhythmic, musical. It sounds like if they want to ask, in Malayalam we say evada poyada, but they would ask orthu poyini. So they have a sort of rhythmical or a little tuned, it sounds a little musical. So apart from that, they don't have a particular script for that. Today they don't use those way of speaking and so on because of the intermingling with other languages and cultures. Now today in my presentation, I would be focusing mainly on how Tudi becomes a medium of communication for them. Now if you Google drum communication, you will find in the some tribes in Africa had this communication through drums, or in rural areas where before the invention of instant communication systems that we have today, where people had to communicate depending on the distance, they would be whistling or they would be shouting, and from the other end of the hill, someone would respond. So that's the mode of communication. So for these people, Tudi, which is their musical language, which is their musical instrument, was a mode of communication. So I'll just make you listen to the sound of. Is it audible to you?
Yes, ma'am, we could hear that.
Okay, yeah. So this is the sound of the Tudi, and I have recorded this as part of their workshop, one of the workshops. Yes, so that is Tudi, the sound of Tudi, how it looks like. Now, where did they use Tudi? The first the first context that I would be looking at is agricultural practices. They had what is called as punam cultivation or slash and burn cultivation. Once these people were the adiyan or the slaves or the tenants of landlords. So they had to work under the janmi, the landlord, from dawn to dusk. And during this slash and burn cultivation, they would be moving with the janmi for cultivating acres of land. So it is a continuous hard work, which they start early morning. They are forced to work there, whether they like it or not. And songs are integral to their existence, and with the song, Tudi also is part of that. So you can hear this, one of my informants, Kairichi Amma, she would be singing that.
പിന്നൊരു കള്ളുണ്ട് അത് ഇങ്ങനെ കളക്കുന്ന പോലെ കയ്യിൽ നിന്ന് അത്രേ ഉള്ളൂ.
Okay, so what she sang is when the song is added to the tilling, within no time both the corners of the land meet together. I mean, meaning to say they don't realize how the tilling takes place. The songs actually ease the burden of working hard on the land. I'll also show you another, and this is the meaning of the song that she sang. Before I show this one, I'll show you another piece of how they used to till the land and how they were. I think my sharing has paused. Are you able to see? Are you able to see?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay.
Ma'am, the video is
Yes.
the video is not playing.
Oh, I see. Okay. What happened? So you could hear the sound, or were you able to see the? Were you able to hear the sound?
I think you need to share the window where the video is being played specifically.
Pardon?
Share that window specifically. Share screen. After you click share screen, you have to press the window where the video is being played.
Yeah, I did that, I think. Oh, maybe. Okay, that's not very important. It was like how the pariga is used. A small spade is used for cultivation, and it is part of the rhythmic steps that they have. Okay, and when this is done, there will be tudi being played when the tilling takes place, and it is called as vittu valal, which means the top soil, the head slave or the head person would be sowing the seed and moving ahead, and the other workers would follow him and covering the seed, the topsoil. Already the soil is ready after the slash and burn cultivation. As part of the slash and burn cultivation. So the soil would be dusty, and after the burning, the ash will be there. So and the heat and everything, these people will be dancing. These two groups would be dancing. And at that time, it is not possible for humanly speaking, it's not possible for them to speak and communicate. So it is the tudi that would be speaking for them. So they would ask, in this punam cultivation, it is not the same type of seeds that they sow. There are different types of seeds which can be harvested within paddy seeds, which can be harvested within 30 days, which can be harvested after 60 days, which can be harvested after 90 days. And then other grains are also sown with this while they plant. So then they have to communicate next which seed is taken for planting. So that is asked, which seed is asked in the tudi itself, and the other tudi player would respond like kaima vitto, and the other tudi would respond as the type of seed that has to be taken or that is sown. And that is how the tudi communicated. Now let me get back to the. Yes, that was one part of communication, while they have to communicate with the group of people. The second one is, as I said, they start working from the morning till the evening, and songs were integral to their hard work. They, as groups, they would sing. These Tudi players are also particularly there for the purpose of a sort of entertainment, as we call, so that to help them out. In the mornings, they would be singing about the landlord, the tamburan, who would come to supervise the work. In the afternoons, it is about the organisms around that they observe, the different types of species. And they sing, the first song would be about the cattle grazer who now returns after grazing the cattle. Then comes the monitor lizards, they move. And then the tortoise, then the monkeys, and finally the birds come. So when the Tudi players sing, play on the Tudi, the imitation of how these animals go back or return after the days, after foraging, they would go back, and that is being enacted. Sorry, when that is enacted, the Tudi player, this is what they were just doing the demonstration. Now, can you listen? Are you able to see? Are you able to see?
We can see your screen, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But we can't see a video. Is it a video?
It's a video. Can you hear?
We can hear. We can hear.
Okay. Yeah.
പോന്നപ്പോ ചെറ്റിടുമ്പെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാല് ഉടുമ്പ് പറഞ്ഞ ആണാവും. പോന്നപ്പോ മുട്ടടുമ്പും പോന്നു. അപ്പൊ മുട്ടടുമ്പും. അപ്പൊ ഈ മുട്ട പെണ്ണാണ് മുട്ട ഇടുന്നത്.
Okay, so this is Ponappa. Ponappa means the monitor lizards. They are returning after the days. I mean, every organism is returning, and these people are still, they continue to work on the land. So this was an indication of the time. Those days there was no watch, there was no mobile phones to know the time. So when these animals return to their home, they know it is evening, okay, afternoon time, what time it is. So that was one function. Next, we move on to where they used the. Sorry. I'm just trying to. Next was for the wedding celebration. The Tudi spoke for the wedding celebration. As part of those days, there was no, as I said, instant communication possible. So from the boys' side, they moved to the girls' house for the wedding on the day of wedding. And when they reached somewhere closer to the bride's house, where the Tudis can be heard, they would stop there and then they would play the Tudi, requesting like agam kerum on the Tudi, like we will come in, and from the girls' side they would say aadanika, means stay there, and again from this side agam kerum aadanika, and they have to wait there. And once the bride's party is ready, they would go, and both of them would converge on a point, and they would outsmart playing Tudi, and they would come to the bride's house and celebrate the wedding. For the wedding itself, there are many days of singing. The previous days, 7 days before, prior to the wedding, the singing starts. Now, the first stroke on the Tudi is like an invitation to the entire community that they can be part of the wedding. Okay, so this is how the Tudi became part of their communication, wherein they could not communicate directly to people due to distance, due to lack of mode of communication like we have today. the Tudi became a medium of communication for them. Yes, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for that very informative presentation. We will start with the question and answer session now. Please put up the questions on the chat box along with the mention of the presenter the question is directed at. I will read out some of the questions that have already been put up to Aditi. The first one, how proficient are you in Sindhi now?
Okay, am I audible? Okay, so okay, like I said, my granny taught me Sindhi, so I know how to speak. I would say kind of proficiently if I had to judge, but I've seen that not a lot of people my age know Sindhi because they haven't been taught by family. So yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones, I guess. So I can speak it. I don't know how to read and write it because the script it's almost gone. Barely anyone knows how to write it yet. It's a very remote kind of script. I have something that my great grandfather wrote for me, and we've sort of laminated it and kept it as a memento of the script. But none of us know how to write it. We can all speak it. So yeah, thank you for asking that question.
To Amirtha, what is the word order pattern in Marathi in general? Hello, Amirtha, can you hear me? Amirtha is not with us in the meeting right now. I guess we'll move on to the next question. To Rishika. Angika is another Bihari language which once had its own writing script called Anga Lipi. Do you have any comments on that?
So I think as of now, the three Bihari languages that I know are recognized as languages slash dialects are Bihari, Bhojpuri, and Maghi, Bhojpuri, and Maithili. So I'm not sure about Angika being another Bihari language as such.
Okay, do we have more questions for the other presenters? I guess we'll end it now. I would like to thank Father Principal Victor Lobo, Professor Arulmani, members of the Linguistics Society, the presenters, and finally all those in attendance for listening.